My question to you is that over the years, has the adjective Jugaad starting to hurt India? Though there are some very senior professors who gave us this book called as Jugaad, but is it coming back to bite us now?
My question is that if today you were building a consumer brand, how would you build it using AI? What would change in that manner?
The word startup has become almost fashionable right now. Of course, there is a need for it, by the way, and I'm not running it down. But it's not a new phenomena or a concept. It's absolutely not a new phenomena. What was our company in 1956 when they started? Or when there were refugees along millions of others, when somebody decided to put a line, a political line, and split the country into two or two and a half, and literally millions had to leave their homes, whatever they had, business, assets, and move across or migrate with literally nothing but the shirts on their backs. And that, as I'm sure all of you are aware, is the bloodiest migration mankind has ever seen on this planet. Till date, there is none which has been worse than that one. So these were people with something to prove to themselves, find ways to provide for their families, and had a sense of desperation. Maybe that was the reason that if you look across North India, a lot of the very successful businesses have been built by those who were actually migrants, who were refugees. And interestingly, this is not only an Indian phenomenon. This is a global phenomenon. When you lose something, you want to hold on either to the memory of that or create something bigger and better. For us today, if I look at where we are, we have over 10 million young people who get to the age where they can actually start productively to work. But if I look at what is the actual number of jobs that we are creating every year, it's sadly way behind. So the reason I said startups is not bad, in fact, startups are wonderful, because while we keep chasing government and large companies for jobs, both of them have a limitation. In fact, large companies, and this is again the world over, do not actually create a large number of jobs. They don't create on their own. They create an ecosystem, because their job is to create a brand, is to create design, is to create logistics, is to create ideas, and then create a value chain around themselves. A lot of it in mid-sized and small-sized enterprises who create the large number of jobs. The large enterprise themselves are constantly trying to bring in more automation, more robotics, higher efficiency, more productivity, and therefore often lower number of jobs. Not more number of jobs, but their attempt is to do more with less. But as I said, their overall ecosystem, of course, creates many, many jobs. I remember some years ago when we were putting up a new two-wheeler facility in Haridwar. I used to be then in charge. I'm no longer in that business now, but I used to be the joint MD of the company, and I was in charge of the project. The Jugaad is often abused. Jugaad has actually got us a long way from where we were. I can again give you our own example. When Hero Cycles was started, that was the first major company that our family set up. And it was started in Ludhiana. They didn't have any resources because they'd come with literally nothing. They'd only started trading before that. What they did provide was actually quite unusual in those days, was integrity to the point somebody made, and customer service. Customer service was almost completely unknown, because that was a time, that was an age where anything you produced would sell, because everything was in short supply. That was a startup, by the way, in the true earnest sense of a startup. Only they had no large VC system They had no mentors. They had no support system. So it was a startup in a much poorer ecosystem than we have today. We are actually very rich in what we offer to the startups. In the early days, one of the shortfalls used to be funding. Now that's no longer a shortcoming. For any good idea, you can get funding. In fact, excessive funding has also become a problem sometimes, because too many companies end up raising more than they need. Then they start misusing or abusing those funds, and then they trip and fall. Because we do know that all over the world, they say you're in great shape if 2 to 3 out of 10 startups do well. In India, sadly, we have a record of 1 in 10. However, to make sure it's not expensive for individuals who come in, we have to ensure that you have endowments and you have provisions for both loans and support systems and scholarships and bursaries. That is essential. Those who can afford it must pay for it. Those who cannot must get the support. So we try and do this in our institutions, in our schools, in our colleges, even in DMC, the hospital that I chair in Ludhiana. We try and create systems where nobody gets refused. If anybody is deserving, they will get in automatically. But inside the hospital or the school or the college, nobody knows who's full fee paying, who's half, and who's free. So the treatment to everybody is exactly the same. But that system allows you to provide that quality of education to everybody, that quality of care to everybody. And I think that's what is important for us as a society. If you go to California, which is the hotbed of innovation in the world, especially if you go to Silicon Valley, why do you think it succeeded? One, because it allowed the entire cluster effect, the entire ecosystem to get built there. Stanford as a university was there, which allowed and encouraged multidisciplinarity. Research was already happening. Actual innovation was going on. The application was happening on the ground, and failure was allowed. So if you're a new startup, when you go to California, you may or may not get funding. But if you had 2 failures, you're guaranteed funding. Because the view is, you already know what not to do. So your likelihood of success is dramatically higher already. So just look at the approach. Whereas we have, I think, the wrong end of the stick here. I do see a change, not enough though. So for us to develop clusters like the Tri-City, like Chandigarh, like Ludhiana, like Jalandhar, like Raikot, like Jaipur, you have, possibility of hundreds of clusters, not just one. As a nation, our single biggest challenge is the poverty that we have as a nation. And that poverty is coming from the mathematics that you can do, and you can do it in many ways. I'll tell you the one simple maths. Manufacturing is only providing 12 to 15% of the GDP. Agriculture is providing even less and is continuing to drop all the time. Services has been the backbone of the economy, has grown, has done a fantastic job, but cannot hold up everything on its own. The numbers keep shifting now. 63 to 65% of India lives in rural India. 45% depend on agriculture as a primary source of income. Agriculture is not providing 45% of its GDP. So directly, you're actually creating poverty in rural India. So for India to develop, all of India has to develop. Especially and particularly rural India. If it was 26% world trade, what is it we were trading? Other than spices, because spices was a big part, but that was not the only part. It was our silks, our jewelry, our handicrafts, our woodwork, our jali, our ivory, our bell metals. I can go down this list. There are over 1,000 items of handicrafts that India was producing and supplying to India and supplying to the best in the world. Across the globe, you will still find Indian products, even today, which were supplied at that time. You will, of course, find them in museums, etc., but you will also find them in collectors. Now, that skill still lies, most of it is in rural India. Those people down the generations have been teaching every next generation that skill. There's no blue book, it's not documented, but it's verbally taught. When you teach people verbally, you also expect them to practice it. The world's largest manufacturing sector is electronic hardware. And we are putting in a full value chain, starting from designs to OSAT, to fab facilities, to packaging, to all of them, and then downstream. Now, we do know that almost any activity in the world today requires silicon wafers and semiconductors. So the smart thing is to do it ourselves, is to build that capability. Defense requires it. Everything requires. Your toothbrush today has the electric toothbrush has a chip in it. Every car will come to a stop. As we saw happening a couple of years ago, there was a shortage of chips. So the car production went down. So for us, it is essential that we understand quality should not have to be asked for. It has to be inherent and inbuilt into everything that we do. Therefore, our integrity becomes important.